Hello there guys, how are we doing? My name's Boomy and you're watching my channel Boomy Reactions. Now today guys, we've got another bank heist video that I'd like to share with you. So today's video has been requested through Buy Me a Coffee and this request comes from Snow. Thank you my lovely, thank you Snow. I like your name. So Snow says, hello Boomy. I would recommend watching Wedigoon's video of the North Hollywood shootout. It's not as doom and gloom as the Unit 731. I should hope so. That was very heavy watching, wasn't it, guys? It's my favourite video from Wendigoon for 3 reasons. It changed policing in the US forever. It partially inspired the bank heist that you see in Hollywood movies today. And it's one of the only shootouts that was completely caught on camera. Now, Snow, I have recently watched another YouTuber cover this shootout. So this one was from Medic. I think I only watched it a few days ago. So this is really going to test my memory. See how well I've retained those details. So the Medic video was a little bit shorter than this one. So I imagine good old Wedigoon, Isaiah, is going to go into a lot more detail, particularly about the details of the shootout itself. And maybe he's going to cover a bit more of the background into, oh gosh, what's the names? Is it Phillips and the Romanian chap? His name is, oh gosh, this is really going to test my memory. Matasarino. Sorry if I've mispronounced that, guys. Wedigoon's going to tell us what the name is. See how well I guessed it. My memory is like a goldfish at the minute, guys. Okay, so the two chaps that committed the heist, the robbery. So maybe Wedigoon's going to go into a little bit more detail into maybe their background. So this is quite a long video, guys. So do bear with me. I'll try and keep my chatting to a minimum. But you know what I'm like. Yes, so this is the North Hollywood shootout of 1997, 97, or was it 96? And so this is the robbery of the Bank of America branch, obviously in North Hollywood. Yes, okay. Testing my memory, guys. So yeah, a little bit of a longer video. Let's watch it, shall we, guys? And if you are enjoying these reactions and apparently mindless chitter chatter, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, my lovelies. If you're interested, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account. That link is over here. And if you would like to help support my channel any further, I have a Patreon account. And if you want to check that out at all, that link is in the description just below there.
Hello everybody, today we're going to talk about one of the most insane cases in American criminal history, the North Hollywood shootout. The North Hollywood shootout took place in the early hours of February the 28th, 1997 in Los Angeles, California. In less than an hour, what was supposed to be a simple bank robbery became one of the largest gunfights in law enforcement history.
I love how we say simple. I don't think there was anything actually really simple about it because I know Medic described them as these bank robberies as being their profession. And that sounds like a really bizarre thing to say, like, what's your profession? I'm a bank robber. But they really did turn this into an actual profession. The level of precision, the detail that they knew. And was it the customized body armor that they used? It's the level of detail is astounding.
One of the most interesting details of the entire case is that nearly the entire shootout was caught on camera, meaning that now we can go back, watch the entire thing play out for ourselves, and decide exactly what went wrong. Okay. And we're going to do just that today. We're going to look at the criminals themselves, everything that led up to and happened immediately after the shootout, and piece by piece break down the events of that eventful day. And if you're not familiar with the events of that day, I cannot stress to you how much this looks like something out of an action movie, and I mean that in the best and worst way. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around as we break down one of the most remarkable cases of a heist gone wrong.
Oh, there we go, I've lost it, there we are. Do you know what strikes me? Maybe I'm just approaching this from a little bit of a, someone who likes the psychology or criminology of the minds behind, the two criminals here. I cannot get over how two young men, and they're all relatively young, aren't they? How two young men find each other, if we're talking about it like a little bit of a bromance maybe, they found each other and they bond over their similar tastes in firearms, and there's a number. Not that it's weird to have a like of firearms necessarily, but they seem to have an awful lot in common. It's kind of like one deranged nutter has found someone of a very similar mind and they just gel over it, and that's how they end up besties. But there must have been red flags. There must have been warning signs about clearly the mental health of these two young men, and it's just gone completely undetected. I know Matasarino, he moved to the US from Romania, didn't he? So okay, I understand that, but family members, friends, teachers, when they were in school, I just can't believe that there's not warning signs of things like this, and it just doesn't get picked up. I mean, I know when Wedigoon is going to go into a little bit more detail about maybe their background, but I would put money on them both probably having something going on in their childhood that it's not good. Maybe there's like a kind of trauma factor going on there. It's quite sad that it just goes undetected.
We're going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. Now, before I dive into the details, I want to say a lot of this information comes from NorthHollywoodShootout.net. The writers over there have not only done a phenomenal job at compiling evidence and sifting what is good information and what's bad information, but they've also created series of charts and diagrams of the events of that day that make it a lot easier for me to get across to you, and hopefully a lot easier to understand. I'm going to link the website in the description, so if any of this interests you, go check them out. Donate if you feel like it. I certainly did, because I know how hard this research can be, and I'm really blown away with the effort. And
just a shout out that this research for videos like this must be so extensive, and so much goes into this, and I can appreciate that. I hope you all can as well. I know you can. But yes, so much research must go into this, and it's difficult, isn't it, trying to sift through the bad information from the good information, the sources, where it comes from, is it reliable? That's difficult. We live in an age of misinformation, but guys, if ever I'm reacting to something, there's details, and for a fact, Boomy, that's not right, let me know in the comments.
Also, I'm going to be my normal joking self through this thing, and if at any point you feel I'm being disrespectful of the victims or lives lost that day, just wait to see how this all played out. Our subject of this story is a bank robbery in Los Angeles, which isn't anything outstanding in itself. From the 70s to the 90s, bank robberies were all the rage. To give you an idea, in 1991, across the entire United States, there were 9,388 bank robberies, or in other words, a bank robbery every 16 minutes.
Every 16 minutes? What is it that made them so popular at this point in time? I am sure I'm not too clued up. That is to say, I don't know how popular they were in the UK. Something tells me they probably weren't as popular. I think we've got the way our banking works is different as well. We've generally got chains of big banks over here, and not just kind of one big Bank of England. There's lots of other lenders and banks here. I know one of my patrons asked me this, so I did go away and I researched it ever so slightly, tiny little bit. And in the 2020s, in the UK, we don't have any more than, I think it's 60 that happen in any given year, which seems really low by comparison. I mean, remember, we are a tiny little island as well. But not only that, but we don't really hear about them. They're not really as reported. So I think, a lot of Brits would probably be quite surprised to hear, oh, Halifax just got held up the other day in Bradford, or somewhere like that. We'd be like, oh, no idea. So maybe they're just not as reported. I don't know.
Nationally, there was over $60 million lost every year to robberies, and that's with an average takeaway of about $6,000, because the vast majority of bank robberies are guys running in with a gun, taking a couple hundred from the teller, and then trying to leave. Probably running into the glass door on their way out too. But every now and then someone would score it big, which is what would drive the numbers up.
See, I again, maybe it's just another difference. I think a lot of the money stolen through burglaries that tend to happen in the UK, maybe more so recently than, historically, a lot of those tend to be more the vans that carry cash in transit from ATMs and things. I think they're the targets of criminals more so in the UK than the actual banks themselves. I don't really think they successfully managed to get an awful lot of money if one of these banks in the UK were held up like this.
And not only were the large cash amounts enticing to would-be robbers, in the 80s, the police said that they were catching about 25% of bank robbers. So statistically, you could walk into a building full of money with a gun and be pretty okay. In the early 90s, the government tried to curb this by de-incentivizing bank robberies. Transportation and storage of money became more secure, guards were more common at bank locations, and on the legal side of it, charges went from a few years jail time to up to 25 years in prison for armed robbery. And as things like forensics developed, that 25% number jumped up to around 53. Part of the reason they cracked down so hard on it was because in high population areas like LA, bank robberies had become a weird kind of pyramid scheme. Around 89, there was this epidemic where these gang leaders would get like crack addicts and homeless people off the side of the road and then give them a gun and then have them walk into a bank and rob the place with a note that was also written for them by the guy who, gave them the gun. So they just walk up to the teller, hand the note, teller would hand the money, and they'd walk away like it was a McDonald's. So if bank robberies are so easy, you don't even have to be at the bank to rob it. Someone should probably do something.
Yes, that becomes a bit of a problem. Just preying on vulnerable people.
In 1992, one gang called the Rolling 60s claimed 363 bank robberies in that year alone. Or in other words, one gang was robbing a bank a day with 2 vacation days. LA was so bad that in 1991, remember that 9,388 figure I gave earlier? Well, 1 in 4 of those was in LA. Think about that. You have this data for the entire United States, and if you remove one city, it drops by 25%. It was so bad that in LA in 1992, there was a robbery every 42 minutes. Why would you work at a bank? I'll get off.
Every 42 minutes, and that's LA. So the statistic earlier, there was a bank robbery happening once every 16 minutes. That's across the US. But in LA specifically, it was 1 every 42 minutes. So why did so many of them happen in LA?
Off this tangent in just a minute, but I decided real quick, how many banks are there in LA? And the first thing I got linked to was bank robberies, because of course I did. And this site is telling me that between 85 and 95, there were 3,500 banks in the region that were robbed 17,106 times. Meaning that if you worked at a bank in LA for those 10 years, statistically, you were robbed at gunpoint 5 times.
No. Oh my God. That's
At what
shocking.
point did you just not use money anymore? Bro, one day in 1992, there were 28 bank robberies in one day. Oh my word. So suffice to say, it was bad. Hence all of the crackdowns on bank robberies that I mentioned a moment ago. Now, this had 2 effects.
Money lost.
One, yes, it did lower the overall number of robberies because people who thought it would be a quick cash grab weren't ready to deal with the security, the lower takeaways, and perhaps most importantly, the long jail sentences. But the second effect that it had is that now, whenever someone came to rob a bank, they came to rob a bank. Gone were the days of sort of small-scale mugging.
Yeah, so now when they happen, they are going to be a very invested affair. You know, there's going to be an awful lot of thought that goes into them, and they're hoping to take a lot of money for the risk.
Where any Joe could just walk into the bank with a pistol, and then the teller would just throw giant white bags with dollar signs on them across the counter. That's how banks work, right? Now, a new type of robbery became more common, called a takeover. A takeover is the kind of thing you're familiar with in the movies, where the people walk into the bank and very loudly assert their dominance by shooting bullets into the air and telling everyone to get down. Because now getting the money was a much more involved process, as was getting through things like security guards and increased police presence.
So even though, yes, all of these measures, they're a good deterrent, but the counter to that is that it has also increased the seriousness of the people that are still prepared to rob banks.
In order to be successful, you had to show your teeth and do it fast. Which leads us to today's suspects, Larry Phillips Jr. and Emilian Matasareanu. Larry Phillips Jr. was born under the alias of Larry Warfel. He was born under an alias because his parents were wanted by the law. At only 19 years old, Larry's father, Larry Phillips Sr., was arrested for grave robbing because he was trying to remove somebody's head because he thought it was funny. And then after that, he committed several robberies for which he was eventually arrested and then escaped, to which he was now on the run.
Okay, bit of background. Okay, yeah, there's no hope for Phillips growing up with a dad like that. You're going to end up a little bit weird, to say the least, aren't you?
So, you know, Junior had a great role model growing up. Other stories claim that his mother was a criminal as well. However, at the very least, she was okay with her husband's doings. His dad was finally caught and arrested the day after Junior's 6th birthday. And throughout his upbringing, Larry had a hatred for law enforcement and authority. Emil's childhood wasn't as catastrophic, however, it certainly wasn't ideal either. Emil was born in Romania, and at the age of 10, he immigrated to the United States with his parents. He was the new kid at school, which caused him to be rather withdrawn and quiet. While all the reports indicate that he had a healthy and wealthy life at home with his parents, he wasn't doing well socially. One neighbor stated in an interview that whenever Emil graduated high school, he threw a party and no one showed up. Also know just because I said that, someone's going to be like, oh, poor sad boy bank robber shootout man. His mother said the one hobby that her son ever really had was firearms, which, you know, I think in and of itself is fine. But, you know, the other thing he did, which was sitting on the front steps of his house and disassemble and reassemble his guns every day while staring at neighborhood children.
Why specifically would you sit on your stoop and do that? Like, do it in your room. Do it in the living room. That's okay. Like, the intimidation factor is there. That's to intimidate, isn't it? Oh, I feel like I just got called out by Wendigoon there. There's definitely going to be someone watching this video that's going to be like, oh no, that's so sad. I don't feel that sorry for him because I know what he's done.
Maybe not okay. Regardless of these shortcomings, Emil became an electrical engineer and even started his own business. Keep that business in mind. It's going to come around in the end. You won't see it coming. It'll be great. Don't worry. Most stories say that Larry and Emil met each other in 1989 at a Gold's Gym at Venice Beach.
I was going to say, I remember from Popo Medic's video, don't they become kind of like gym rats together?
Some other stories indicate that they knew each other beforehand, but 1989 is as early on the timeline that can be confirmed. You wouldn't think the two would get along, but after they figured out that they had a shared interest in firearms and eventually crime, they were a match made in not heaven. Now, it can't really be confirmed what was happening in the next several years following their meet. It seems that Emil was running his business for some time, and Larry was running his own business that we'll talk about. But for reasons I'll talk about later, I believe they were doing small-scale crimes during this time, and were slowly working their way up to what they would become. That side hustle of Larry's was real estate scams. He became a real estate agent and started doing all of these backdoor schemes in order to steal money from clients. He also shoplifted a $400 suit for funsies, I guess. So before his first
Sure.
big arrest, he had already stacked up a history of white-collar crime. There are several other crimes, because remember, LA was getting robbed a lot, that are believed to have been perpetrated by the two men, although it can't be confirmed. Unofficially, they are associated with 2 armored car robberies and 3 bank robberies. I mean, it's, not hard to see why. If all these were really them, then their first official hit was on an armored car on July the 20th of 1993. That incident went off mostly without a hitch. That was until October the 29th of that same year. The 2 of them were pulled over for speeding, and whenever the officer walked up to the window and began asking them basic questions, like where's your driver's license and insurance, they started to get nervous. Or at the very least, Emil did. See, at this point, they were using so many fake IDs and names for when it came to vehicles they were renting or properties that Larry was trying to scam someone on and false business practices, that it was pretty easy to get their stories mixed up, which it seems Emil did. When they were asked, is this your car, they were supposed to say that they had rented it from the airport because the car was rented from the airport. Instead, Emil panicked and said it's Dennis's mom's. Dennis was the alias that Larry was using at this time. So the cop was suspicious, he ran numbers on the car and saw that the story doesn't make sense, so he eventually arrested them and searched the car. In the rental car, they found 2 rifles, 2 handguns, 3,000 rounds of ammunition, police radio scanners, smoke bombs, IEDs, body armor, and 3 fake license plates. I almost have to give them credit for having the gall to drive around downtown LA in a rented vehicle with a small armory in the trunk.
And be stupid enough to go over the speed limit, which is just drawing attention to yourself. Like, if you are actually carrying that in your car, behave. It's pretty simple, isn't it? Now, if I remember correctly, and I'm very surprised this hasn't come up actually, that it's not been mentioned here. Maybe it's a different time they've been pulled over. I'm sure, I'm referencing the Papa Medic video again, they were found to have a lot of hair dye in the car as well. The covering the greys for men. I think is the most hilarious detail here. Maybe it was on a different occasion when they were pulled over. But 2 relatively young men, maybe there was a reason that isn't as funny, but when you hear that, just, oh yes, they had all this ammunition, they had all these guns, they were speeding, and they had 6 boxes of hair dye.
2 were charged with conspiracy to commit robbery. Duh, because after they ran their names and prints, they saw they were using fake aliases and had a record, and I'm sure those IEDs weren't medicinal. They were each given short jail sentences and 3 years probation. The most important part of this is that they were each given felony charges and had all their guns confiscated.
That their mugshot. Why have they got such kind of like Wuthering Heights style open chest tops? Gonna smile for the camera, boys.
Over the next few years, again, this is assuming that they did rob all of the places it's assumed that they robbed, they would hit another armored car in June of 1995, this time killing one of the guards aboard the armored car, and then torching the vehicle that they had drove in order to get rid of evidence. I guess they like heat. And then in 96, robbed 2 Bank of America locations. If they did do these hits, then they had stolen at this point about $1.5 million. The pair, only known for their ski mask and AKs, were dubbed the High Incident Bandits.
Yes.
There we go with the cool names again. At this point, again assuming the previous robberies were them, they got this method down to a science.
I still kind of feel like that the title that they've given them doesn't really roll off the tongue, Be a little bit more creative.
They would go in loud, shooting rounds into the ceiling in order to freak everybody out. One of them would get the crowd to lay down and not look at their faces, so there was no risk of them being identified, while the other would go to the back door, shoot the door open to the teller's area, and have the bank manager take them to the vault where they would load cash into bags and then leave. Several of these heists took place in under 3 minutes. And given that the average police response time in the area was 8 minutes, the business was doing pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in their lead up to the big heist that, you know, was their undoing ultimately, they've had to have like a few kind of practice runs, you know, to kind of perfect their craft, if you like. Yeah, I think that's what these little minor things were. I think it probably was the two lads here, and it's kind of pushing boundaries. It's seeing what they can get away with, and ultimately they have almost perfected it, haven't they? I mean, 3 minutes to get in and out, knowing that your average police response time is 8 minutes. It sounds weird to say, and I don't like saying it, but they're good at what they're doing.
However, as we're going to find out, for each of these heists, they brought an absurd amount of ammunition with them just in case something went down. They had planned for their next hit to be at another Bank of America location, this time the one at 6600 Laurel Canyon Boulevard. This was the largest Bank of America location in North Hollywood, so they assumed it would have the largest takeaway.
Am I right in thinking as well, I'm sure this was mentioned, again, I'm going to keep referencing the other video, sorry guys. This particular branch was chosen because of its access to get in and out. So like its position and its layout on the road. That's why they chose it. Is that right? Why? Like, this might be a really daft question. Why did they target Bank of America branches? And I'm asking that because, like I say, in the UK, we have many different high street banks. It's not all the Bank of England, you know, there's the Bank of Scotland, we've got Halifax, we've got loads of them, loads of branches, different lenders. So maybe it's different in the US, but why have they specifically chosen Bank of America? I mean, it's not your only bank, is it? But you guys don't have chain, like big shit. I know what I'm asking. I'm just not articulating it very well. Are your banks more localized, and Bank of America is one that has numerous branches all over the US? Is that right?
This location had a parking lot to the north and south, with a neighborhood bordering it on the east and a shopping mall bordering it to the west. While this did mean there was a higher chance to be seen as it was a high traffic area, it also meant that there were several escape routes. And in order to maintain fire superiority, the pair would bring with them 3 Norinco Type 56 rifles, or in other words, Chinese AK-47s, a Bushmaster XM15 dissipator, which is essentially a Sporter M16 with a shortened barrel, an HK-91 or civilian G3, and a Beretta 92 FS. The guns will come into more detail as things start to go wrong, trust me.
Okay, that's good. The names and these things are going over my head. I'm learning. I'm trying, but they are going slightly over my head.
The pair also heavily laid up in body armor,
yes,
each wearing bulletproof material for a soft vest before inserting metal trauma plates underneath those vests. Phillips went a step farther by wearing what's called a groin guard, or essentially a bulletproof diaper, as well as taking pieces of Kevlar and duct taping it to his arms and legs. All of the weapons that they brought were not only illegally obtained, because if you'll remember they were both felons, but they were also illegally modified, save for the Beretta and the HK-91. If anything were to go down, the men would essentially become walking juggernauts, and as we're going to see, that's exactly what happened. Each of the men wore gloves in order to hide their fingerprints, so the gloves had sewn-in watch faces so that they could time the robbery itself. So on February the 20th,
to beat their personal best, I feel like they've thought of everything. It's actually, I'm not going to go as far as saying it's impressive, but the amount of detail, like, this really is a profession for them, isn't it?
28th of 1997, the two men pulled into the north parking lot at 9:16 a.m. To calm their nerves, the two downed phenobarbital before they walked in. Phenobarbital is typically an anti-seizure medication, but for what they were using it for, it was a very intense nerve suppressor.
Yes,
the two set their timers for 8 minutes and then exited the 1987 Chevy Celebrity. Completely kitted out, the two made their way to the sidewalk and then began to walk into the Bank of America.
What was their kind of train of thought when it comes to the nerve suppressants? Have they had experience of holding up a van or, you know, a heist, and their nerves have got the better of them? Or do you think they go with the idea of when you're nervous, you act on impulse and it makes you stupid? So you will make impulsive decisions. And I mean, is that the way of thinking behind that?
And that 8-minute timer probably would have been okay if it wasn't for a patrol car that just so happened to be driving by at the same time. The patrol car saw the two guys in ski mask, bulletproof armor with rifles walking into the building and figured it was a problem. Walking into the front door, there was a man using the ATM who Larry grabbed, threw on the floor, yelled, "This is a holdup," and began shooting into the ceiling. Larry kept shooting and telling everyone to get down, while Emil ran to the teller door, shot the lock off, and then grabbed the assistant manager. Can
you imagine any police officer observing two men walking into a bank dressed like this and not having that thought in the back of their head, like, oh, this is a red flag. That's not normal. Let's we need to get in there, see how this pans out.
As soon as the two had walked in, the teller hit the panic button, although that didn't really matter because, again, the patrol car already saw them. And Emil made his way with the assistant manager to the vault to start loading the bags with money. Now, as mentioned earlier, a lot of these robberies only took a couple minutes. However, due to the recent string of robberies, a couple probably committed by Larry and Emil, the banks had changed procedure. So now, instead of just opening one key and all the money was there for the taking, money was composed into these small individual lock boxes. Because of that, it took way longer to load the bags with money than it had previously. On top of that, the pair had planned to hit the bank this Friday morning because there was supposed to be a money delivery a few hours earlier. However, again, because of the string of bank robberies, deliveries were purposefully sporadic. So Emil kept yelling at the assistant manager to give him the rest of the money because he thought there was more even though there wasn't none, and what there was took longer to get a hold of. This would cause the two to eat up the entirety of their 8 minutes. Larry was again out in the lobby on crowd control. However, for some reason, 3 minutes after this all began, he walked outside to the front door of the bank. To me, this indicates that he probably saw the patrol car see them as they were walking inside, because I don't know why else he would do this. He walks out the front doors and then just standing there, ski mask and AK to his side, looks down the street one direction and down the street to the other direction and then just walks back in. It's
maybe he had to get some fresh air, you know. It's still becoming a bit much, a bit overwhelming for poor Larry.
To believe that whenever he looked south, he could probably see the cop car, which was the initial cop car that called for backup. So what probably happened, in my opinion, is he saw the cop car and then thought this is probably going to be bad. So then he's on crowd control. He gets everyone to lay down. He then walks back outside to check, sees the cop car and thinks, yeah, it's going to get bad. After he comes back inside, he goes to the security guard who is laying on the ground with everyone else before putting a gun to the back of his head and saying, "Whenever I tell you to, move everyone into the vault." Larry then says something to Emil, most likely informing him that there's police outside and it's about to be a fight. So Emil zips up the bag he's been filling, which contains $303,305, as well as 3 dye packs. Dye packs, for those that don't know, are these little packets of dye that are made to explode if something's stolen or taken away, so that it becomes unusable and traceable for whoever stole it. I'm sure
I had no idea. That's clever.
Emil wasn't aware of this, and after a short discussion with Phillips, they changed their game. While all of this is happening inside, on the outside, police are taking up defensive positions around the front door of the bank. I also want to mention really quickly, I looked at so many different interviews and documentaries and websites in preparation for this, and this always happens with stories or cases I read about, that some information's wrong, but like entire documentaries had no idea what they were talking about. Like, the majority of them conflicted with the footage that is clearly visible and just said that the pair did things that they did not do. One of the documentaries said that the two split up at one point and Emil walked out of a door that doesn't actually exist. One of them claimed that Emil was so intoxicated on the barbiturates that he passed out at one point, which he did not. And one of them claimed that Larry tried to kill Emil. No. It was too dumb not to mention. I had to get that off my chest. Especially before this whole situation goes from bad to worse, which it's about to right now. So
why would these documentaries contain such random information? I mean, where is the source of that information? But where does it even come from? Why do they do that? Maybe they want to be the only people that have come out with this information, so it maybe draws people. I don't know.
The first wave of officers has now made their positions in front of the bank, and Emil is currently trying to bust open the ATMs in order to get some more money. So Larry steps out of the bank, now seeing more police cars lined up in front of him, and just starts shooting. Again, his AK had been illegally converted, so it was just full auto fire in the middle of a busy street in LA at 9 in the morning. See, for those that don't know, police were not allowed to carry rifles in their cruiser during this time. Because of that, nearly every officer at the scene only had a Beretta M92 or a Smith & Wesson revolver, meaning the largest caliber that the police had on hand was this, a 9mm bullet. Okay. For a comparison, one of the guns that Larry used was an HK91 chambered in .308, which, if this is a 9mm, this is what they were carrying. Yeah. Now, normally up close, it doesn't matter, a bullet's a bullet. However, this gunfight took place from several hundred feet away, and Larry and Emil were decked out in body armor. Meaning, even if a police officer managed to hit an insane shot from 200 feet away with a handgun, the armor would catch the round. Yes. And meanwhile, Larry and Emil were able to pierce through the doors of police cars. So for the first 4 minutes, through
the doors of police cars. Oh, it sounds like such a trivial detail here, doesn't it? Especially to people who, you know, like, I know nothing about guns. I'm UK culture. We don't see guns. Most of us for our entire lives, we will never see one. So at first glance, that detail looks quite insignificant, but it's very, very, very significant, because what Emil and Larry can do with their weapons is quite devastating, really, compared to the weapons that the police have, the ammunition. It's not even making them flinch. So immediately they have this huge advantage. Larry's just standing outside, shooting a lot, and then reloading, and then shooting again without really worrying about cover. Yep. And the police on the receiving end were essentially pinned down and taking on casualties. Absolutely. Several officers and civilians were receiving gunshots to the legs and arms. The police began retrieving shotguns from their vehicles, but again, at the distance, they didn't do much, and what they did do, the armor stopped. Even I know that one.
An officer who was wounded stumbled into a dentist office that was located in the West Strip Mall. And as he stumbled into the door bleeding, the dentist began to patch him up as his partner stood inside and watched the door with a shotgun.
And the dentist essentially used the his office, his surgery, whatever you want to refer to it as a kind of like first aid receiving place for the law enforcement here. Is that right?
After 4 minutes of this, Larry steps back into the doorway of the bank, and Emil comes out to join him. The police during this time are trying to take pot shots at the two, but anytime one of them gets a shot off, they're met with a hail of gunfire. This continues for about 3 minutes before the duo decide to make their way back to the car.
I bet that 3 minutes felt like a lot longer.
Also want to shut down a rumor that's often associated with this case. A lot of the media outlets that report on it, and again, even make documentaries about it to this day for some reason, say that these two were unbelievably intoxicated and barely able to comprehend what they were doing. There are several cases coming up that disprove this, and the first one's here. The two began a bounding maneuver in which Emil laid down covering fire for Larry as he ran to a position in the parking lot, and then whenever Larry got there, he stopped and laid down covering fire for Emil as Emil ran to the parking lot. Also during this time, several who were on the scene, including the officers who were interviewed, said that the two were lousy shots, and that's why most of the shots missed their target. However, during covering fire, the purpose is not to wait for someone to pop up and then fire. It's to lay down enough shots so that they never have a chance to fire. The two were very skilled and very well thought out when it came to their strategy, which is what makes the following several minutes all the more interesting. As Emil began to follow Larry to the parking lot, about 6 feet after leaving the door, the dye packets exploded. Now, what Emil did not know, or at least didn't realize in the heat of the moment, is that most of the money was fine as it was still wrapped in plastic. However, Larry, thinking that it was all ruined, dropped the money bag. Also, during this time, all the officers on the scene had their own events going on. For example, one officer that was shot in the leg pulled off his gun belt and used it as a makeshift tourniquet to stop the bleed. And upon rounding the corner to the parking lot, Emil finally took his first effective hit when he was shot just above the eye. This was also around the same time that media helicopters began to arrive on the scene and film from the air. During the video, you can see Emil grabbing his head and then touching the hood of the white car next to him and the clearly visible blood print. It seems that getting shot in the face highly discouraged Emil from continuing the fight. At this point, it's believed the two had taken several rounds with the body armor, but you know, the face is a big deal. After this, Emil goes and sets down in the car. It's unknown if he did this in order to leave or if he was just trying to gather himself. But either way, Larry was certainly not leaving as he made his way to the trunk and began resupplying on ammo. Now, what happened during the next 20 minutes is a mystery. There seems to be a conversation happening between the two on the ground, but we can't be sure what it is. Regardless of what Emil's intentions are in this moment, it seems that Larry is ready to fight. He keeps sweeping the areas where he saw gunfire coming from earlier, as well as checking the streets to which police could be coming down, as well as coming around the building and checking the drive-through lane. All the while, when he goes to these corners, he continues firing shots. Now, it's not known if Larry was doing this for strategic purposes. Perhaps he thought the only way he could get away is if he took out some of the resistance as he did it, or if he just decided that this was going to be his Alamo and he was going to take some guys out while he's on his way. Now, at this exact point in the gunfight, whenever the two of them are by the vehicle, it's very possible that the two could have driven away. The police who were there were pinned down and couldn't do anything to stop them. One officer even remarked over the radio that if they try to leave, don't shoot. Now, could they have gotten away long term? Probably not. There were 6 helicopters watching them at this time, but that's like a long-term problem. He was probably worried about the short term. Or at least he should have been. Maybe Larry just didn't know his situation and was convinced the police would show up around the corner at any minute.
I'm in two minds as to what I think Larry's mentality was at this point, because I'm sure I'm not spoiling this for many viewers. These are Larry's final moments. You know, the pair of them, but more so for Larry sooner. I have a question. This is a weird question, but it's just popped into my head. So we know the pair are, they've taken the nerve suppressants. Do nerve suppressants, or this one in particular, does it act in a similar way to alcohol in that it's a depressant at all? Because just with one thing that Wedigoon mentioned there, so Larry had noticed that he thought the money was ruined with the dye exploding in the bags. So he's dropped the money. He's sacked the money off. To me, it kind of sounds like someone who's got quite a defeatist mentality, like it's over, you know, there's no point in going on. However, he's still shooting. So, and we know his end. So that's made me question the effects of the suppressant. Is it similar to alcohol in the fact that it's a depressant? So, you know, maybe it's going to plunge your mood, and just a thought. But yeah, Metasarino is he seems like less of a bit of a defeatist at this point, like he's going to carry on. No, just a thought.
It's partially right, as one cop made his way along the cement wall that separated the bank from the neighborhood to the east, and upon seeing him, Larry let out several rounds towards the wall he was hiding behind. During this time, Larry was hit at least 3 times, with one of them believed to have hit him in the side where his armor wasn't protecting him. Either from the drugs or the adrenaline, though, it didn't seem to bother him. At this same time, everywhere around the pair was being locked down. The streets were being shut down several blocks away, and all the schools in the area went into lockdown. Again, during this time, the police guns didn't really do anything. So a few police drove down to a local place called B&B Guns and barged in asking the owner for more firepower. The owner gave them 5 Colt Sporters, 2 Remington shotguns, and several magazines. At the same time, even though the surrounding roads were shut down, paramedic crews began to make their way in and try to help the injured. At this point, it seems that Larry had ran out of ammo for the belt rig that he was using. So he walks to the back of the car, again Emil still sitting inside, and Larry ditches his gear and pulls out the HK-91 that had yet been used. He then grabs several magazines for it and continues to fire. However, at one point, he reaches into the car, possibly to tell something to Emil or grab something from Emil, when an officer stands up and shoots him in the arm. Larry continues to fire rounds, but for the rest of the gunfight, he can be seen using his left arm to support the rifle rather than hold it. At least not hold it with any efficiency. It was possible at this point, now that his support arm was down, that he realized it was about to get bad. In either frustration or trying to get them out of the airspace so they could escape, Larry started shooting at a CBS helicopter. While this was going on and he was just firing wildly into the air, never hitting anything, several of the paramedic teams were able to evac people on the ground. Also during this time, news reporters began to get close and get footage from the ground of the pair trying to escape. In another move that, again, people who cover this say was a drug-induced paranoia, but if you watch the video, is actually a pre-plan. Larry...
Would paranoia have been really the overwhelming emotion from this drug? Yeah, I think it's this point he's starting to feel quite hopeless about the situation, but arguably you could say he's seeing less threat from the police, given that, you know, they're so heavily armored, and the threat of, if there's any chance of getting away, you're going to be recognized, because now you also have reporters and helicopters around. So maybe it's that, I don't know, if they've stopped recognizing the threat from the police and start recognizing the threat from being recognized through footage and cameras. So now they're changing their target.
He begins getting out AK magazines and setting them on the roof of the car. People point to this and say that he was out of his mind and trying to reload a gun with the wrong mags. But what it seems he was actually doing was counting the rounds he had on hand for his 91 and realized that he would soon need to switch back to an AK. It also seems because of this that he had communicated to Emil that they need to go now. However,
I don't think that would make him deranged, would it? I think if you're acting in a little bit of a panic, I don't think that would be evidence of you being in a drug-induced confusion.
However, the problem with this was so many shots had been fired at the two at this point that not only were the majority of the windows in the parking lot shot out, but the Chevy had 2 flat tires. While Larry is reloading the HK, Emil slides over to the passenger side of the bench seat and begins giving covering fire. It's during this time while walking around the side of the car that it seems Larry was hit 3 times. He then began to fire back, seemingly unfazed. However, many believe that this was the killing blow. And not for the round that Larry took, he was only shot in his hand and seemed to be okay, I mean his left arm was down anyway, but because of the round that hit his gun. Again, Larry was using an HK-91, and for YouTube this is airsoft or something. The furniture's different, but the operation of this one's the same. The HK-91 has a short mag well that you load your magazines into so that they can feed rounds into the gun. In a rather bizarre malfunction, his gun was shot right there at the front of the mag well. This created a sort of divot in the gun itself so that the magazine became trapped inside of it. So he couldn't get the old magazine out when he needed to reload, and he certainly couldn't put a new one in. Again, some consider this to be the kill shot because it causes Larry to do what he does next. Larry then ditches his gun in the back of the car and pulls out a now 3rd and previously unused AK. I think he was already mentally planning to switch over to this one, hence him laying out the AK mags. But this was a problem as his AK kept jamming. Now, my theory behind this setup, and this just makes the most sense watching the whole thing to me. These guys had illegally converted all their guns, except again for the HK and the Beretta that were still semi-automatic. To convert these guns, which I am not going to explain on the internet because I like not being in jail, but it requires some level of cutting and sawing on the internals of the gun itself. Because these guys were familiar with the firearms, I think Larry knew that that AK was defective. Because think about it, he had used an AK initially in the robbery, and then he took all the time to take off all that gear and then put on all of the HK91 gear, only to then take all of that off and then put on the AK again. It seems like he really didn't want to use that AK for some reason. Now the solution to this would be, why didn't he just use the original AK that didn't have any problems, but all of the AKs were loaded with these big drum mags, so maybe mentally it just seemed easier to grab the AK and start shooting. I don't know, just a thought. Either way, it seems his gun kept jamming. He would fire a burst of rounds, then have to clear it and continue. It also didn't help that, at least inferring by the footage, he was shot in the left forearm again and was now leaning on the side of the car. With all of this happening at once, Emil really wanted to leave that north parking lot. Eventually, he leans over to the passenger side and pushes open the door for Larry to get in, but Larry, determined to do whatever he's about to do, slams the door shut and remains outside. So now, Emil is driving the car with 2 flat tires as Larry uses it for rolling cover and continues firing. While still firing and possibly communicating something to Emil, they get to the exit of the north lot and Larry makes a bound for cover to his east. There was a large tractor trailer parked there, which actually was only parked there because a neighbor had complained about its previous position the night before. While still being shot at, Larry runs to one side of the tractor trailer for cover, while Emil drives around it to the other side. It seems that the two lost sight of each other here. Emil starts to slowly gas the car as if he's waiting for Larry to come out on the other end, and Larry starts looking back and forth on either side of the truck to see where Emil is. It was during these few seconds that an officer had looped around to Emil's side of the tractor trailer and began shooting at him in the vehicle. Emil panicked and gassed the car, and in the video you can see the car hit the curb and then correct itself. But it now meant that Larry was completely alone and without cover. While standing and supposedly looking for Emil, Larry got shot twice in the back, one of the rounds hitting his subclavian artery. It's very possible here, with that shot being the first shot that would have given a lot of blood and pain, that Larry started to panic. Because while returning fire from behind the trailer, his gun jammed again, and this time he made it way worse. See, Larry's gun had experienced something commonly called a stovepipe. In other words, one of the casings that was supposed to come out of the gun instead stayed inside the gun. On the inside of the AK, there's this little rail that runs along the left side of the firearm. One of the casings had become stuck underneath this rail. Now, normally, if he was thinking straight, which it seems earlier he was as he had cleared like 3 of these jams, all you would have to do is remove the magazine, the casing would drop out, you put the magazine back in and you're good to go. But Larry, seemingly in a panic, grabbed the bolt and started racking it down, which as you can see, runs in that area where the casing was stuck and makes it dig further down in the gun. And he just started racking that thing over and over and essentially broke the gun. In order to fix what he did, it would take an entire field disassembly, which he did not have the time for. This is why many say the shot to the HK earlier sealed his fate, because it caused him to get a faulty gun, which he then made much worse in frustration. That and the shot to his subclavian artery, which would have gave him realistically about 30 minutes before he bled out. Seeing nowhere else to go, Larry crawled underneath the tractor trailer. Shortly after Larry had crawled under the truck, a cop car came up that was chasing Emil's vehicle. However, the driver looked towards the tractor trailer and saw Larry hiding underneath it. So they quickly got out of the car, shot towards Larry, and probably hit him another 2 times. I think it was during this time Larry really put together that this wasn't going to end well. He went from his very tactful and straightforward idea to a much more sloppy, casual walk. He drew his handgun from his shoulder holster and began firing it one-handed at the police.
So yeah, he's still going. Okay, this blows my little theory out the water. So I thought he would have been almost like despairing, thinking, right, it's over, we haven't got an awful lot of options. This isn't going to end well. I thought he would have been in that mentality a little bit earlier, but no. I would have thought, because Wendigoon mentioned earlier, they did have an opportunity to get in the car and drive away. They could have done it. I mean, it might not have been, a long-term plan, because it would have ended with them being recognized by, the helicopters, the crew, the cameras. Okay. But to fix a short-term problem, they could have got in the car and got away, and then presumably the tires were shot out, even though Matasavino is still driving it here, isn't he? He seems to be more of the mind where he's thinking, we can still get away, get in the car. And it seems to me that Larry is very much of the opinion, like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to do anything. We're done for. But he's still putting up a fight, isn't he? He's still shooting.
In his left hand,
So
for some reason, he was holding an HK magazine, as if he was going to make it back up the road to the car and get the gun back out. It's possible at this moment that the lack of adrenaline and blood loss was getting to him. Yeah. He continued to exchange shots with the police until one of the police rounds hit him in the hand, causing him to drop his gun. It was at this moment, having been shot, as we're going to see, a lot, bleeding everywhere, and now being shot in both of his hands and his gun laying on the ground, that Larry decided it was over.
Yeah.
And also that he wasn't going to jail. So Larry leaned over, picked up the gun with his injured hand, and took his own life.
Yeah.
The police, not able to see anything from their angle, had no clue if the guy was crouching down to reload or laying down to take a shot, so they just kept shooting him as he laid on the ground. This is a darker video, I'm just now realizing, but hey, monetization, who needs it? I also have to mention this side story because it's hilarious. The house that was immediately next to, or on the corner of, where the shooting took place, had a man and his housekeeper there at the time, and the housekeeper kept trying to leave, and the man was saying, no, you can't, there's like a gunfight going outside. And the housekeeper, who was from South America, said that he was being a wuss because this happened all the time where she's from, and he needs to quit being a baby about it. So then while
she's made of strong stuff. Oh my God, you're being a wuss. It's fine.
the two of them are having this argument, literally like 10 feet away outside, the shootout just ended with Larry. So the police come to the door for some reason and ask if they can use one of the man's bed sheets to cover up the body of Larry. And the man was like, no. Which, understandably, imagine if a guy comes into your neighborhood and decides to turn it into Desert Storm, and the police are like, we really need to, be respectful of
Yes, we need to preserve their dignity after they've caused all of this damage, civilian and officer casualties, but we need to respect their privacy. Maybe borrow one of your bed sheets. No.
I'm like, no, I'm not ruining my wife's linen sheets just so
can you imagine
he
the
doesn't
trouble?
have to get some sun. I'm sure he's not complaining. So now the only person who's left
Don't want to get
is
in trouble
Emil.
with my wife.
Also, at the same time, SWAT had finally arrived to the scene. SWAT didn't mobilize towards the bank until the second report of an officer down. Again, as we established earlier, if SWAT arrived at every bank robbery in LA, they would have to be deployed several times a day. Yeah. So now that the main gunfight was over, the SWAT officers were in cop cars just driving through the neighborhoods around the bank itself because everyone was on the hunt for Emil's car. So it was essentially a giant game of Pac-Man. Emil, who has been slowly rolling his car in intervals, then gets out of his car and looks back towards Larry. Now, at this point that he did this, Larry had been killed, although the police hadn't come up to his body yet. However, it's very possible from his position that Emil was able to see Larry lying on the ground. Right. Emil does a quick move towards his chest in what's seemingly a fist over his heart, possibly saluting his fallen friend. Larry then drives towards a vehicle and very calmly tries to steal it, but the driver of the vehicle just keeps backing away. And then maybe the funniest thing of this entire event, actually the funniest thing of the entire event, Emil tries to wave him to come back, which is so funny. Imagine you're driving and then a guy gets out of a car and he's got a rifle and a ski mask and body armor. And as you're backing away, he's like, no, I promise. It's
dude, help me.
from here that Emil does something I can only describe as car shopping. He pulls in front of one car and then stops, backs up, and keeps driving. And then he pulls in front of another car and then stops and then hits another car and then pulls away. Eventually, he sees a Jeep and decides to steal it. Hey, so I'm editing this right now and just wanted everyone to know I have no idea why I called that truck a Jeep. It's very plainly a truck and not a Jeep at all. And I'm going to continue for the rest of the video you're watching to refer to it as a Jeep for some reason. Okay. The driver of the Jeep begins to back away, but then Emil shoots through the window, breaking the glass and cutting the driver across the face. Oh. Reports are conflicting here, but the driver either pulled the key out of the ignition or hit a kill switch on the vehicle before ditching the car. Emil was not aware of this, so he pulls up next to the Jeep, begins throwing stuff into the back of it. However, whenever he gets into the driver's seat and tries to move the car, again, it won't move. He supposedly bends down and tries to figure out what's keeping the car from moving, and as he's doing this, a SWAT car sees him and is able to pull up right in front of him. Emil,
to be fair, that was very quick thinking from the Jeep driver. Not Jeep, but the Jeep driver.
sees this at the last moment, gets out, and then runs back around to take cover behind his own vehicle. It's from here that gunfire continues for about 2.5 minutes straight. Emil grabbed a new gun out of the truck, the previously unseen dissipator with the 100-round beta bag, and just laid over the hood of his car and kept shooting. The SWAT team who was behind their own vehicle was returning fire and getting several hits, however they kept hitting the body armor. One of the SWAT members, Officer Anderson, moved around the car in order to clear a jam, and whenever he did, realized that he could get an angle on Emil's legs. So he leaned underneath the Jeep and began firing, several of the shots hitting Emil in the uncovered legs. Emil realizes where these shots came from and begins returning fire the same way, before Officer Gomez lays down and takes a few accurate shots into Emil's arm that's now ducked under the car, and this causes Emil to drop his weapon and finally give up. Emil throws his hands in the air in order to surrender. However, the police, who are laid under the car, continue firing and strike him in the buttocks and leg. The officers then move around to the front of the car and cuff him as he laid on his stomach. Unknowing if the guy had a bomb or other weapons on him, one of the officers aimed a gun at the back of his head to make sure he didn't try anything, and the front of the gun was so hot that it seared the impression of the flash hider into the back of his head.
Oh, that's a bit of a gory detail.
After this, police and news crews managed to come up and begin to get action shots of the scene, which led to this very iconic image of the arrest. The police kept asking for Emil's name, to which he gave the false alias of Pete. Another thing that had happened that I hadn't mentioned because we've been in like the, cool gunfight part of it, is that there were several false calls happening at the same time. By the end of the day, there were 17 calls from the neighborhood who saw 17 different people who they all thought was the shooter. If they saw anyone doing anything, they called 911 and said that it was another robber. To the degree that someone called the police because they said they saw someone working underneath their car. Yes, I'm sure that the robbers, as they were making a hasty getaway, decided to repair this random guy's Dodge.
I mean, to be fair, maybe they've just watched Phillips get under the truck trailer. Maybe they've thought someone's doing something similar. Oh, they're just trying to help.
Because of this, the police did not know if there was another suspect that they need to be on the lookout for. They tried to ask Emil if there was another suspect, but he just kept yelling for the police to shoot him, so that wasn't really a help. So the area was still on lockdown. The police kept trying to get information from him, but he just kept saying things like, F you, kill me, I hope you die, and other pleasantries. Emil had been shot a lot, but every one of his shots was in the legs. Now, while thigh shots can definitely be fatal, it doesn't seem that he had something like a clipped femoral. However, what he did have was a bunch of barbiturates in his system. Barbiturates can also act as a blood thinner. So it's quite possible that the drug he was on caused him to bleed out a lot quicker. In a move that is very highly contested to this day, Emil laid on the ground bleeding for 56 minutes. Now, this argument has two sides. On the one hand, there were several calls coming in that another gunman was still at large, and considering how violent the shootout had been, I highly doubt these guys were going to assume that if there was a third one, he'd be in a talking mood. And also, Emil wasn't being very forthcoming, so it's understandable that they'd still be on alert. And the other side of the argument is that this guy had just shot up a bunch of police, so maybe the police that were there just weren't in a hospitable mood.
For 56 minutes, are we saying that Emil, should he have received medical attention sooner, maybe he wouldn't have bled out and then he would have been put on trial? However, given the circumstances, all of the medical personnel that were there should be tending to the wounded police. I think he would be so far down the list of priorities, you know, given the damage that the pair have just done. You're not going to be very forthcoming with offering them assistance when there's other people there that would need it.
So, after 56 minutes of laying on the ground, Emil died due to gunshot wounds to his legs. The area was still on lockdown and the search would still continue. However, what the police didn't know at the time was Emil's death was the end of the action that occurred that morning. The gunfight lasted 44 minutes, with some accounts saying up to 2,000 rounds were fired, with 1,100 of those rounds coming from the two shooters. This gives an estimate of about one shot every 2 seconds for the duration of the gunfight. Around 300 cops ended up responding to the scene either during the fight or afterwards, and one of the largest gunfights in LA history was nearly entirely filmed. So how many people died in this massive shootout?
Only the two
None.
criminals.
Well, excluding the two shooters, but they don't count. Now, it is true that during the whole scenario, 12 police and 8 civilians were injured, but as mentioned, no one was killed.
But not fatally.
Hi, it's me again, the editing me, not the video me. I hyped up how many shots Larry and Emil received and then forgot to say it in the video. So now I'm here to tell you that at least 11 shots made contact with Larry's skin, and probably way more hit his armor, and Emil had 29 bullet wounds in his legs. Again, more shots definitely hitting his armor. These numbers are going off of the coroner's report, which is why we don't have exact numbers for how tore up the armor was. Now, that 29 figure is a little bit misleading. That's not bullet holes or bullets in him, that's bullet wounds. So if a round struck the pavement and shot 5 pieces of fragment into his leg, that would count as 5 wounds. So while not 29 individual bullets, I'm still sure he was having a terrible time. Now, the events of that day carried all the way to 11:30 that night when the lockdown was finally lifted. Some parents weren't able to get their kids out of school until 8 p.m. because everyone was on high alert that someone else may be out there. And again, as mentioned earlier, this was due in part to the entire neighborhood calling 911 every time they saw a bird out of place. In a case that I still don't really know where it came from, the police, for some reason, thought that this supposed third gunman was hiding in the storage shed of this old guy's house. So the police come to his door and are like, "Sir, we have to investigate this third shooter. Can you and your bedridden wife leave for a while?" So the old man's like, "Okay, officer, I guess." So he puts his little wife in a wheelchair and puts a blanket over her because it was February and it was cold. So as soon as they leave, the police pull up an armored truck and immediately break a hole in his wall and just tear up his entire backyard and start trying to destroy the shed. Like, what kind of operating procedure is that? You think there's a guy in a shed, so you spend like 2 hours destroying everything on your way to the shed. And
what was the mentality behind that? I mean, I understand the urgency to try and find what you believe there might be a third shooter in the area. Yeah, I get that. Why are you punching holes? Not punching, but why are you making holes in walls when you think they're in the shed? Oh, that man and his poor wife.
Eventually they tear it open and lo and behold, it's just a shed.
Well,
and then that old couple's son found them wandering around the neighborhood at 7 p.m. that night. Like, what a just mean thing to do. Also, to continue the police's weirdness, whenever they thought there was a third gunman, they decided to have a low-flying helicopter fly over the neighborhood and loudly announce from the megaphone to give up because your accomplices have been captured. Imagine if you were just at home and didn't know what was going on, and then you walk outside to a helicopter 20 feet over your head telling you to surrender. Now, there's a couple mysteries to this case that I think would make a good bow to the whole thing. One of them is the story I just mentioned, the story of Emil bleeding out for 56 minutes. One of the reasons that he was allowed to bleed for 56 minutes is because there was a lockdown on the area, so anyone who wasn't police was not allowed in or out.
Medics.
While several medics who were closer to the bank decided to break that rule in order to help people, at one point they even commandeered an armored vehicle and began driving around the front of the bank picking up people who needed aid, which is pretty cool. But two medics decided to break rank and go to the area where Emil was shot. Initially, the medics were treating the guy who had glass in his face because he was the one driving the Jeep whenever Emil shot at him. A quick funny story about that guy. After he got out of the Jeep, he ran to the first house that was near him and began banging on the door and asking the person inside to let him in. However, the person who was inside was a 60-year-old lady who turned to her front door and saw a man with blood all over his face banging on it and called the police that there was a madman outside. Whenever the two medics arrived, they saw Emil laying down next to the car and he wasn't moving, so the medics just thought that guy was dead. However, as they were treating the driver, who they said had minor wounds because it was just glass tearing at his face, they saw Emil move, so the two medics immediately began to run towards him. As the medics were running towards them, a lieutenant stopped them and said, "What are you guys doing here? Don't you know there's another gunman nearby?" So the two of them got out of there thinking that they were in immediate danger. However, they remarked afterwards that this was weird because at this point all the cops had their gun holstered and were just casually standing around. That lieutenant would later say that a police sergeant ran up to them, said that there's more gunmen around the neighborhood, be careful, and then ran away. This magical running officer was never identified and an order like this was never given. And also, if it was, they would tell them over the working radio, not have a cop run by himself down a street that's supposedly infested with robbers.
Yeah.
Also, it seems that those two medics had their report fabricated, because whenever they pulled those medics' reports later, it was written down that the medics said they had decided to treat the guy who had the glass hit his face and all that because he was in critical condition. However, as the medic said that day, the dude was pretty fine. He just had some cuts across his face. And the police used that to justify why Emil was not given aid. The children of Emil would later sue the police department for wrongful death. Also, it was...
His children sued the police for unlawful death. I'm sorry, but your father has just, there's a list that you just committed a burglary, the attempted murder of all of the police in the area, the disregard for any of the civilians in the area. Wow. Okay. Do you think there's an element of the police that are feeling very, very hostile, rightly so, towards Emil, and are just under no circumstances want him receiving any medical aid? But then, I don't know, I feel like he should be brought to trial. Oh, it's a tough one. But then I kind of feel like it's more important that the medics give the aid to literally everyone else before the two committing the crime. Although, okay, the one, because the other one's
very clear that the family knew everything he was up to. It wasn't like this was a surprise for them. So people saw it as being pretty cheap. The trial ended
Yeah.
in a mistrial and was never really
Gross.
picked up. Again, it was a pretty unpopular decision to have the trial in the first place. But it's still a mystery to this day how much was fabricated and for what reason. The other mystery is about Emil's electrician business. Yeah, we're going all the way back to the beginning. So Emil started this electrician business in the late 80s. Whenever he started this business, he had a projected profit of about $150,000 to $250,000. In the early 90s, he reported his income as being closer to $2 million. Now, normally, this would be perfectly normal. It's not uncommon for a business with several employees in Hollywood to be making about $2 million a year. However, when the police were investigating all of their assets after they were dead, they went to this business location and it was an abandoned building. The electrician company was being used as a front with a reported income of, again, $2 million. So it seems that they were using Emil's business in order to launder their money. Now, the reason this ties back into the mystery is because the North Hollywood shootout took place in 1997.
I thought they were going to try and claim life insurance. How does your policy stand when the person who, you know, he's has died during a bank robbery? Does that invalidate your loved one's claim? I don't know.
And the earliest supposed robbery that the two had committed was in 1993. So then, why in 1992 was an abandoned business making $2 million? This could mean that the two were committing several other crimes previously to the one suspected, and potentially other bank robberies. So these two may be responsible for far more crimes than what is currently believed. Also, these two each had their wives in on it, helping them launder the money, and they were renting several properties under false aliases across LA, and it seems living rather lavish lifestyles with having cars separated in different parts of the city. So it was like Breaking Bad, but with banks instead of meth. He just like me, for real. The police investigated all of these properties and eventually found one that had a makeshift bomb-making site in it, as well as several other rifles and ammunition. It's not known where these two got their weapons. Again, they were felons, so they couldn't have purchased them, but it does seem they did the illegal conversions in-house. Also,
so it doesn't seem that far-fetched, actually, that the police were concerned that maybe Emil had a bomb on him.
There was a push in government at the time to allow officers to more strongly arm themselves because there were concerns that police could be confronted with a force that was more heavily armed than them, which is exactly what happened. So while it wasn't the only cause of it, the North Hollywood shootout was definitely the catalyst that made it to where police officers began arming themselves with semi-automatic rifles. With several people even pushing the idea of the modern militarized police force back to this event as its beginning. There's a lot of other weird side stuff that's happened during this investigation as well. For example, it seems the ATF doesn't have any or got rid of all their documents related to the case. A lot of things like the vehicles and records that the two had has completely gone missing. Autopsy photos show that somewhere between the news camera's coverage of the scene and the autopsy being performed, that Larry had received another gunshot wound to the forehead. So what was that about? A wound that, mind you, was not mentioned in later reports, only in photographs. And several of the properties that contained vital information were seemingly found on a whim.
The famous photo, we do see Emil, he's got blood on his head here, but I don't know whether that come from a wound from further back in his head, or could you see the forehead wound?
Final thing I'm going to mention is the weirdest mystery of the entire story, and I have no idea what to make of it. So remember how I said they investigated Emil's office and it was just an abandoned building? Well, that wasn't entirely true. The top floor of the building had been converted into a sort of housing thing. So whenever the police search the second floor, they find a 44-year-old woman named Georgia Mayo. It was completely undocumented that herself or anyone else was living there, and apparently she had been locked in this room for over a week. According to her, the door was locked and she was kept in there, and someone would show up to deliver her food and medicine. However, for the past several days, no one had came. Again, this was undocumented housing in the second floor of a supposed electrician business that was actually being used as a money laundering front for a guy who died in a police shootout.
She's the cleaner. She's the accountant. No?
I'll be honest, I have absolutely no idea what to make of this.
What the
Emil's
hell?
mom was named as a suspect, but I don't think that ever went anywhere. I don't know what that relates to.
She's got some relation
and
to
it bothers me a little bit. I hope one day I can make an update to this video that's like, oh, a whole conspiracy that was taking place between them and the LAPD, but it's probably just weird one-off stuff. The whole story's kind of weird, but I also think it's kind of interesting because it's the one time that I can talk about a weird shootout that looks like something out of an action movie and no one died, you know, besides the people who started it. And I think it's really neat.
They don't count.
Things like bank robberies and shootouts are often overlooked in the whole true crime sphere on the internet, but to me they're some of the most interesting, especially because, you know, the focus isn't on child murders and instead hee hee haha gun go boom. And I think it's something I'm really interested in, and hopefully you did too, and hopefully if you stuck around this long it wasn't awful. And I just want to say thank you for watching. Like I said, I really think the shootout stuff's cool, and there's actually a couple other shootouts that I wouldn't mind covering. We'll see if YouTube nukes this one in the algorithm / monetization, but sometimes you got to do stuff just because you like it. It doesn't always have to be profitable.
Absolutely.
It would just be nice, you know, since this is a full-time job, if the majority of them didn't do that, but one every now and then's fine. So that being said, let me know if you like this, assuming this video stays up. And if you do, I would be down to cover a series of other shootouts or other standoffs like that. Because like I said, that's a really cool little niche that not a lot of people talk about. And I think it's really neat to look at the details of it. It also gave me an excuse to be a nerd for a couple minutes. But that's the one time I get to use that knowledge on here. But really, thank you all for watching. I really enjoy that I'm able to talk about pretty much whatever I want. And hopefully, knock on wood, you guys manage to continue to support me. And that really does mean a lot. Again, I hope you all enjoyed. A bunch of cool projects on the way. But for now, I'm tired and I need to edit this and get it up. So I'll end it here. But I just want to say thank you. Oh, sorry. Whoa. I got that too soon. Thank you to all of my subscribers. Thank you for getting me to this point. It means a lot. Thank you to all of my ex-patrons. I couldn't do it without you. Almost lost it there. But now that that's done, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed. And I will see you in the next one.
See you in the next
Bye.
one. Bye.
Hello.
I think it's always really enjoyable watching people discussing things that they're interested in and they're passionate in, and you can see it and it shines through, and it absolutely does with Wendigoon's videos here. And when he nerds out about the guns, it does go over my head a little bit, but I'm learning. Oh my gosh, I'm talking too much. I am learning. I do try and stay, you know, at least a little bit. Not knowledgeable, but, you know, I do try and learn. It's very, very interesting. I love the level of detail that he goes into in these videos. He seems very, very knowledgeable. I'm sure compared to an awful lot of viewers here, he's not as knowledgeable about guns and all this as other people, but all the same, his videos are very, very enjoyable. Like I say, the level of detail that he goes into is so, so interesting. I'm a nerd for detail. I very much enjoy it. So thank you so much, Snow, for requesting this video. A very interesting one. I know I compared it quite a lot to the last one that I watched, which was from Papa Medic. If you haven't seen it, guys, go away and watch it. Exactly the same event, but in a kind of different style. It's a little bit shorter. Speaking of which, for those of you that are still here, thank you very much for reaching the end of this video with me. There are a handful of details there, just one or two that are kind of hilarious. And we didn't mention the hair dye. I wonder if that's actually not true. Oh my gosh, and Emil, I'm just like slowly driving by. Oh gosh, the man that's just like backing away from him, like, no. He's like, that's a crazy detail at the end with the lady that had taken up residence in the second floor of the abandoned business building. I think she's the money cleaner, the rinser, the accountant. What do you think? If anyone knows anything about that, let me know in the comments. It's very, very interesting. Just a random detail. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching along with me. Hopefully you found that as interesting as I did. Take care of yourselves, my lovelies, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.